In 1863, the country was divided into a civil war. Brothers were fighting among themselves. The war had been going on for some years, and the Union forces had expelled the Confederate troops from the state of Missouri. In this context, Jesse James, only 16, joined the bushwhackers, a guerrilla group fighting against the federal occupation. These small guerrilla squads used to ambush the invaders from the north. These actions were known for their violence. But despite their brutality, these men had the support of part of the local population, who often saw them as heroes. The war between the Union and the Confederates had already ended, but in Missouri, the bushwhackers continued to fight the invaders. With the death of the guerrilla group's leader, and after being seriously wounded in a gunfight, Jesse James was forced to swear loyalty to the Union and to lower his weapons. His injuries were treated by his cousin Zerelda Mims, whom Jesse would eventually marry. After the war, Missouri tried to return to normality, but the Civil War had left its scars. The resentments caused by the war divided the population. The defeated Confederates were subjugated to those who supported the Union. A new battle that would pit brothers against brothers could break out at any moment. In this scenario, Jesse James and his brother Frank opposed the current order and decided to become outlaws. In the following years, the James brothers robbed several small banks. Despite these actions, Jesse James was still unknown, and his name was not linked to any of these robberies. In 1869, Jesse and Frank robbed the place where Samuel Cox, the man who killed the bushwhackers' leader, was working. In this robbery, Jesse mistakenly killed the bank clerk, thinking that this was Cox. During the escape, Jesse screamed euphorically, believing he avenged the death of his former leader. It was this crime that popularized Jesse James. The story of Jesse James's robbery and revenge reached the ears of John Newman Edwards, editor of the Kansas City Times and advocate of the Confederate cause. Jesse was the hero he needed to rekindle the flame of Southern pride. The James brothers accepted their fate as Southern heroes and focused on attacking Northern ventures. They robbed banks, stagecoaches, and railway companies of the wealthy Northern businessmen. Jesse James seemed to enjoy fame. Several witnesses stated that Jesse used to tell the victims that they should feel honored to be robbed by the famous Jesse James. In exchange for their belongings, he gave them a great story to tell. Part of the Southern population believed that Jesse James was some kind of hero. He was hailed as a Wild West Robin Hood. Jesse James came to believe in the mythology that surrounded him. But Jesse James was no hero. His actions were not guided by honor or virtue. His criminal and violent acts were motivated by resentment and a desire for revenge. He was a cold-blooded killer. Several of his victims were unarmed in their last moments of life. The governor of Missouri decreed a $2,000 bounty hunt in exchange for Jesse James's head. But the population and local law enforcement ignored or even protected Jesse James and his brother. The state's inability to solve the James brothers' issue allowed private enterprise to take over the task. The entrepreneurs who had their businesses damaged by Jesse's gang came together. They hired the National Detective Agency Pinkerton to fulfill the mission. Alan Pinkerton sent one of his best agents to find the James brothers. Although experienced, the agent underestimated the support the James family had in the region. The outsider raised suspicion due to his overly inquisitive questions. The agent was shot, and his dead body had a note in his pocket. It said, "This is what happens to anyone who challenges the James." But Alan Pinkerton did not allow his company to be humiliated in that way. The Pinkertons surrounded the James brothers' mother's house for revenge. They threw incendiary items to force the bandits to leave the residence. One of these artifacts exploded and killed the younger James, who was still a child. The mother's arm was also cut off. The two brothers were not at home. The Pinkertons' disastrous action tarnished the company's reputation, which led them to walk away from the case. This episode further enhanced Jesse James's reputation. He became a Confederate hero, persecuted by the evil forces in the North. The population came to admire his actions even more. Jesse James brought together a group of reputed Confederate bandits for one of his main assaults until that point. The target was the First National Bank in Northfield, a bank whose partners were reputed politicians with ties to the North. It was an excellent target for a publicity stunt for the Southern cause. The people of Northfield realized that the assault was being prepared and organized to repel the bandits. The citizens triggered a massive shootout on the city streets. The assault was a massive failure. Several of Jesse James's compatriots were killed. The brothers managed to escape, but practically without having robbed anything. Jesse James's gang was captured and extinguished. It was the beginning of the fall of a myth. The James brothers remained hidden for some time near Nashville, using false identities. Frank James got sick of the crime life and started to enjoy his new quiet and common daily routine. But the same did not happen with his brother. Jesse put together another group to rob trains, but the synergy between these new bandits was not the same Jesse had with his old guerrillas. But the political scene in Missouri had changed. The former Confederates regained political power in the region. The figure of the bandit and rebel Confederate was now a problem for the new political class. A great bounty hunt was announced for anyone who captured or killed any of the James brothers. The reward made Jesse James more and more paranoid. Without his brother Frank at his side, Jesse James relied only on two of his fellow brothers, Charlie and Robert Ford. But he didn't know that Robert Ford conspired together with Governor Thomas Crittenden. The goal was to betray Jesse and keep the whole bounty hunt for himself. Jesse James planned his next coup without suspecting that the enemy was inside his house, waiting for the perfect opportunity to attack. Jesse grabbed his weapons and put them on the furniture, because he was preparing for a trip and feared that the neighbors would feel threatened by seeing a man heavily armed entering and leaving the house. He climbed into a chair to clean a dusty painting, and Robert Ford noticed the opportunity. He shot the unarmed Jesse James in the back and killed one of the greatest legends in the West. The murder of Jesse James caused a great stir and was news all over the USA and abroad. Hundreds of people surrounded the house where he was murdered to try to see Jesse's body. Robert Ford was tried and sentenced to death for the murder, but received a full pardon from the governor. He would become known as the man who killed Jesse James. Ford would be murdered years later by Edward O'Kelly. After killing Robert Ford, he proclaimed himself the man who killed Jesse James. The conspiracy over the murder of Jesse James increased the legend of the man who fought against the powerful. Whether as a hero fighting an oppressive system or as a violent outlaw and cruel killer, Jesse James wrote his name among the great legends of the West.